Welcome to Nightmare Patrol. If you love true horror stories from the darkest corners of the wilderness, you're in the right place. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and don't forget to like and share if you enjoy these tales. Now get comfortable because the nightmare is about to begin. My normal shifts were during the day from 9 to 5 like most people, but that day we were short-staffed for the night shift because the last person who worked those hours just left. Lately, many people had been leaving the night shift, so that meant I had to cover it. Strangely, I had never worked the midnight shift before, and I was actually excited about it. I brought coffee and some energy drinks with me because the shift was from 10 to 5, and there was no way I could make it that far naturally. I arrived at my tower a little before 10, when it was already as dark as night, and the cool July night had already settled in. The tower was quite tall, with several flights of stairs leading to the top. The whole structure was mostly surrounded by dense forest except for the trail I came in on, and a murky lake that sat to the right of one of the tower's legs. The lake itself was covered with small lily pads and had algae floating on the surface. It was really big for a natural pond. I climbed up, and all I could hear were the incessant sounds of crickets, frogs, and the occasional owl. When I got to the top, I fiddled with my keys until I finally found the right one and walked right in. The only room was small and square. 3 of the walls were almost all glass, and the other was opaque and had the door I just came through. The roof rose like a pyramid for a short length until it reached the peak, and it was all made of wood. To my left there was a well-made bed and a nightstand with a lamp and a flashlight on top, not that I would be using the bed. On the wall next to that was my CB radio and the communication stand, which all these towers had. Beside that was my refrigerator and microwave, which were part of a small kitchen that stretched to the other wall as well. Inside the kitchen on the right wall, there were several cabinets, some small ones holding snacks and canned food, and another set of giant cabinets that I couldn't open, probably filled with vacuum cleaners and other cleaning supplies that were above my pay grade. Spacious. I went over to the communications stand and did my standard check to make sure everything was working correctly. I called the ranger station channel and said, "Well, Donnie, looks like it's just the 2 of us tonight." Donnie didn't respond, so I figured he was just taking a dump. I grabbed the flashlight from the stand and put my hand in one of its drawers, pulling out a pair of binoculars. I walked back out onto the balcony and checked for any signs of fire or anything else dangerous out there. After checking that box off my to-do list, I went back inside and pulled the chair from the communication stand and placed it near one of the glass walls, grabbing a granola bar from one of the kitchen cabinets to eat. I brought the binoculars to my eyes and looked out at the surrounding forest. It didn't seem like any animals were moving, and no birds were in the sky either. I scanned through a few clearings to make sure no teenagers were camping illegally. Then I went and looked at a distant ridge where I saw a snowman standing alone in an opening in the trees. Wait a minute. It was July. I looked again to see it wasn't a snowman, but a child in a cheap ghost costume. It looked like the ones from Charlie Brown, with big black eye holes that seemed more like they were painted black than actual holes. The kid was standing, looking straight in my direction, motionless. I couldn't see the kid's parents anywhere, and it was almost 11 o'clock, so that meant something was up. I lost sight of the kid and went over to the radio, calling the station. "Donnie, you done in the bathroom? Just barely got out, but I'm here." I laughed. Donnie was always good for a laugh. "There's a kid with a blanket walking around the southeast sector, and they seem to be alone." "A blanket? What the hell are you talking about?" "It's a ghost costume. It has the black holes for eyes and everything." "You mean like the Charlie Brown costume? Can you check it out?" "Yeah, he'll head out and see what's going on. He'll call you on the walkie-talkie to tell you what I see." "Roger that." I hung up the radio and went to the nightstand drawer to grab the walkie-talkie. After I had it, I sat in the chair and put the binoculars to my eyes, zooming in on where the kid was. The ridge was empty with no child in sight, which I knew would make this 1,000 times harder. I raised the antenna on the walkie-talkie and dialed the right channel. "Donnie, you read me?" "Yeah, loud and clear. I'm getting close to the sector, heading up to a ridge for a better view." "Perfect. That's where I saw the kid, but they moved since then." "Well, you'll have a look and see if I find anything." I watched Donnie pass through the ridge, waving his flashlight through the darkness until he looked up at the tower and shrugged. "Nothing over here." "Damn, I hope it shows up again. Until then, He'll just notify the police and see if there are any missing person reports. All right. He'll head back to Donnie's voice cut off, and I saw his flashlight go out in the distance. The small lit spot where he was standing got swallowed by the darkness. Donnie? You there? Donnie. I didn't hear any response, so I rushed out the door and around the corner to where I saw him, shouting his name, only to hear my voice echo back through the forest. And that's when it hit me. There wasn't a single sound in that entire forest. The crickets and the frogs stopped singing. The wind wasn't rustling the leaves. Everything was completely still. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears and nothing else. I moved my flashlight through the forest in a futile attempt to find him. I entered that mental state where I got so scared my throat closed up. And if I moved, I felt like something really bad would happen. I had to do something now. I turned around, and as I did, I looked at the stairs below me. At the bottom was a thin woman, horribly crooked. She was tall, dripping wet, with black hair and dark blue murky skin stretched over her broken, twisted bones. Her gray dress was torn and her black shoes were muddy and wet. And her face. Her eyes were milky white and her mouth was open like a snake's, as if her jaw had been terribly broken. She let out a scream of agony and pain that cut through my ears and started running up the stairs so fast it snapped me out of my fear lock. And I ran inside, slamming and locking the door behind me. There was no way she could run that fast, even if all her bones weren't broken the wrong way. I ran back to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find, then picked up the walkie-talkie, screaming into it. Is anyone there? Donnie, where the hell are you? Somebody answer me, damn it. Then I heard the creak of a door. I turned slowly and froze at what I saw. The door was still there, locked and shut, completely untouched. What scared me was the giant cabinet that had been locked before and was now open, with a kid dressed as Charlie Brown's ghost standing right in front of it. I stood there motionless until I heard the little idiot laugh. I recognized that laugh. No way. I pulled off the sheet to see one of Donnie's kids, Marvin, sporting a mischievous grin and holding a walkie-talkie. Dad, Joey, I got him. Ha, did he piss his pants like I said he would, right? He and his other son laughed on the other end of the walkie-talkie. I was angry but happy I wasn't about to be murdered in a wooden tower. I grabbed his walkie-talkie and threw it back at him. You pissed me off, you little brat. Hope you're happy. Hearing you scream like a little girl made me happy, yes. Yeah, screw you too, it wasn't even me, it was your stupid zombie girl. Who was she, your wife? My what? The ghost looks like a zombie from so far away? You even said it looked like Charlie. Not the ghost, idiot, the woman on the stairs. She screamed and ran up them to scare me in the tower. Hell, she must be like an Olympic sprinter. Did you get Usain Bolt? Dean, I didn't put any woman on the stairs. After finding out that I would have the night shift for the next 2 weeks until they found a replacement, my friend quit and swore never to go back to that park. To this day, he swears that Donnie never told him that part was a joke, or that he saw something completely different. I began to question my own participation in the night shifts, and I consider myself lucky to have been assigned to the north and east sectors the few times I was there. My grandmother lived in a house by the lake near Gaylord, MI, where my parents and I would go frequently every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for over a decade, until my grandmother sold the house. Our routine was to pack all the necessary gear for a 3-day camping trip and load it into our backpacks. We'd grab the mountain bikes and head to one of the state forests. Then we'd find a random 2-track trail that led into the woods, always aiming for those that seemed like they hadn't been traveled in years due to overgrowth. We'd find a place to park, unload the bikes, and head out. Usually, we'd make our own trail when we could. The goal was to find a creek or river and set up camp in any clearing we came across. We typically ended up just in a clearing because we never ventured more than 10-15 miles from the truck. One time we came across the foundation of an old house. I assume it used to be a home. There was no trail or road for miles around, right by a creek, made of stones the size of bricks. There was a small wooden cabin, I don't know, maybe 10 feet or so from the foundation, about 12 feet tall. I remember my dad had to bend down, and I just crouched, I was just a kid, to get inside. Inside there were rusted shotgun barrels in abundance, Fishing poles, snowshoes, bedding, old pots and pans, etc. Clearly, the area hadn't been used in a long time. Just cool stuff for a 12-year-old. We set up camp about 20 feet away. We caught some bullfrogs and cooked them for dinner, along with some nachos fried in the pan on the small Coleman stove we had, with those old-school mini propane tanks. No light pollution. The night sky was amazing. We could see so many stars. To this day, my favorite part of camping is after dark. That night, just before we went to bed, we tied up all our food and hung it about 15 feet up in the air on a branch, just like you see in the movies. Essentially, to keep bears and other animals away. Our normal nighttime routine. Shortly after we closed the tent to sleep, we started hearing grunts and snorts from across the creek. My dad, being an avid hunter, said it was probably a deer or elk, maybe a bear. We'd seen all of these and more on our trips. The sound travels far, so my dad wasn't too worried. We heard it all night, but the sound started to get almost baby-like. The only way I can describe it is imagining a baby crying softly. Add to that some very deep snorts and grunts. Periodically, we'd hear a sharp, high-pitched scream, loud but very brief. To me, it sounded like a baby screaming, but scary. Throughout the night, these sounds came and went. My dad carried the Remington and I had my small 20-gauge shotgun for small game just in case. My first gun and my first time carrying it on one of our trips. Eventually, we fell asleep. We woke up to nothing too out of the ordinary, except for a smell of rotten meat like a dead animal. We assumed an animal had died and we were just smelling it in the wind. Sometimes we'd come across coyote kills or other animals, so we didn't think much of it. We went out to a beautiful sunrise and the sound of flies. My dad just figured we'd lost the food and the flies were on it now. My dad walked behind near the food bag and stopped abruptly. He just said very slowly, "What the hell?" Behind our tent there were 3 deer hanging, skinned and gutted. The deer were hanging from 3 different branches on the same tree where our food bag was, which was untouched. Each head had been cut off and placed on top of the guts. Each head was facing directly toward our tent. No one around. No tracks, no blood trail. Nothing. Just 3 deer, hanging by vines. Not string or rope vines. My dad grabbed the gun and went to try to find tracks or blood. He has an excellent tracker and has been a guide for some experience hunts in the UP. He found nothing. We didn't hear anything during the night either. It was creepy as hell. I was really scared. My dad was too, so we packed everything up that Saturday and headed back to the truck. No incidents on the way back. Just a normal half-day drive back to the truck. We drove to the DNR station and reported it. I just remember the guy looking at me, then at my dad, slowly shaking his head and picking up the phone to call whoever. All he said was something like, "Another skinned animal sighting near such and such creek." Clearly, this had happened before, but what the hell? My dad never found out if it was someone or something. The fact that my dad couldn't find any blood spots or tracks where those deer had been dragged, or any footprints of where they might have walked, is what still leaves him most perplexed. We still talk about it over a beer every now and then. He also doesn't know where the vines came from because he looked around the area, and there was no tree nearby with vines. My name is Thomas Keller. I've been a park ranger for over 17 years. In all that time, I've seen it all: bear encounters, lost hikers needing rescue, strange people performing rituals in the woods. But nothing prepared me for what I found in the so-called forbidden sector. This place doesn't even show up on the maps. No marked trails, and the higher-ups avoid talking about it. All we knew was, no one patrols the forbidden sector. Never. By direct order from Washington. But then came the summer of 2017. 3 teenagers went missing in the forest. Their phones stopped transmitting a signal near the same area right on the edge of that damn sector. It couldn't be ignored. And as the most experienced ranger in the district, I was chosen to check it out. On the morning of my departure, the chief pulled me aside. "Stay out of the sector itself. If you hear anything, you turn back. Understand?" I nodded, still not understanding the gravity of the situation. With my radio, GPS, and backpack, I entered the woods at 7 a.m. The first sign something was wrong came in less than an hour. The forest fell silent. No birds, no insects. It was as if someone had turned off the sound of the world. My radio, which had been fine moments before, went completely silent. I kept going, relying on my GPS. The signal started to flicker and then froze. I tried turning back, but nothing made sense. I was walking in circles, but there were no signs of my earlier steps. And then, I heard it. A distant sound like a child crying. "Is anyone there?" I shouted, my hand already close to my weapon. No answer, just the increasingly louder cries. They came from a gap in the trees, where the light seemed to bend, like time itself was distorted. I moved closer. Yes, against all sense, I did. And when I crossed that threshold, the forest changed. It was an old watchtower, much taller than the usual ones. I climbed it carefully. Up top I found decaying diaries, scrawled by someone named Ranger McAllister. He wrote about creatures that whisper names and a rift that opens every 27 years. The last entry was dated 1990. It read, "They come at night. If they find me, not me anymore." The diary ended with a strange symbol that caused a headache just looking at it. I stayed there until dusk. I should have left, but there was more. A light appeared between the trees. Faint, flickering. Like a lantern, I descended and ran toward it thinking it was one of the missing teens. But what I found was not human. 3 figures. Tall, too thin, dressed like us but their faces stretched, with no eyes. They emitted sounds like radio static. When they saw me, they screamed, but their scream wasn't a single voice. It was the cries of hundreds pleading for help. I ran. I hid in a cave. Inside, I found ancient markings on the walls, figures painted by some native tribe. They depicted a creature emerging from the earth with dozens of arms surrounded by kneeling men. I laid there trying to sleep. But I was awakened by something scratching the stone. I looked outside and saw the same creature from the drawing. Enormous. Dozens of eyes. It was staring directly at me, even from a distance. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was back in the normal forest. The tower was gone. It took me 2 days to find my way out of the woods. When I came back, no one believed me. The teens were listed as missing forever. The forbidden sector was restricted again now with barbed wire, drones, and even military surveillance. I tried to investigate Ranger McAllister. There's no record of him anywhere. Since then, I've been haunted by that creature. Sometimes I hear voices whispering my name at night. And now that it's been exactly 27 years since the last disappearance mentioned in the diary, something tells me the rift will open again, and next time maybe I won't be able to escape. I was traveling alone through the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, making several stops at Olympic National Park. I decided to stop at Quinault for the first time and took a random road that ended at a beautiful spot by the Quinault River. There was an old wooden bridge that led across the river, but it looked like it might collapse if I tried to cross it, so I decided not to. It was the off-season, and I wasn't in a tourist area. I was completely alone. It was so hot outside that I had to get into that water. I parked my car at the dead-end road, facing the direction I would need to leave, and started walking through the thick vegetation, down a slope. To the water's edge, there was no path. It was a pretty rugged area. It was mid-fall, and I didn't have a swimsuit since I hadn't planned on swimming. So I just took off my clothes and went into the water in my bra and underwear. I took a good swim, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even though I was in the middle of nowhere. After about 5 minutes, the creepy feeling became too much, and I decided to head back. I turned my back to the other side of the river and walked toward where I had left my clothes and shoes. When I turned around, there was a large, tall man in full view, standing across the river but higher up the slope than I was. He was wearing a cloak made of animal pelts, had long hair tangled with sticks and branches, and looked like he had been living in the wilderness for a very long time. We stared at each other, me, frozen in terror for what felt like an eternity, when suddenly he started running toward the old wooden bridge that crossed the river. I grabbed my car key and tried to grab my clothes and shoes, but they were tangled in some blackberry vines. So I left everything and ran for my life, barefoot and in my underwear, through the dense vegetation and blackberries, trying to reach my car before he crossed the river. There was no doubt in my mind that he intended to hurt me. As I broke through the blackberry bushes, I could see he was crossing the bridge toward me quickly. I made it to my car and opened the door just as he arrived. I locked the doors while he was slamming his fists on the hood, screaming and grunting without any real words. As he moved toward the driver's side door, I floored the gas pedal and drove off as fast as I could. When I looked back, he was chasing me. He must have run after my car for at least a kilometer before disappearing from view. I was bleeding all over from running almost naked through the blackberry bushes. I was wet, barely clothed, shaking and crying. If I had hesitated literally 10 seconds longer, I don't think I would have survived. Even typing this story again after all these years, I'm starting to tremble. I felt like I was being hunted. That's the only way I can describe it. I will never, ever return to that area. Since that day, I always take a friend with me when I go hiking into the forest. That day will haunt me forever. I've had many years of therapy, and that experience is still as vivid as the day it happened.